The evolution of the clones into the modern stormtroopers is one of the most fascinating aspects of the Empire's development, and the transition between the two ensures that the clones continue to have a lasting impact long after they were cast aside and deemed obsolete by the forces that created them. One of the factors that carried over was the evolution of clone orders, many of which were repurposed for stormtroopers and aided the Empire in locking down their grip on the galaxy. One particular order had incredibly disturbing implications on the era of the Clone Wars, yet it was incredibly effective when it came to hunting and killing Jedi. So, what was the dreaded Order 37? Why was it so discomforting during the Clone Wars, and why was it one of the most effective methods of luring out Jedi in hiding post the Jedi Purge? Well, stick with us today, students of the Force, and let's dive into that exact question as we analyze the most dreaded clone order in existence. Clone Order 37 was the directive that allowed the clones to turn against the civilian population in order to capture a wanted individual. The first phase of this would begin with mass arrests from across the town or village, as well as widespread civic lockdowns, taking civilian hostages in order to force an individual out of hiding. After the widespread arrests were established, the clones would give an ultimatum. Either the wanted party surrender themselves, or the hostage would be executed on sight. These hostages in question were not in any affiliation with the Clone Wars conflict, nor were they necessarily even separatist sympathizers. They were quite literally just innocent civilians that had the misfortune of being caught in the crossfire between the clones and the Jedi. Yet the clones had complete clearance to use violent means against the civilian population to further their own objectives. Perhaps the most disturbing detail of this, however, comes up when we consider the nature of the clone orders. It was revealed in the days after the execution of Order 66 that the clones did not have any choice in the matter. Their brains were essentially hijacked and they were turned into Palpatine's puppets, albeit for a brief but an incredibly crucial amount of time. This means that if Order 37 were ever to be issued, the clones would have been forced to comply without any say in the matter, and even the most morally righteous of the clones would not have been able to resist the orders and their duty to carry out the order in question, just like what occurred during Order 66. Order 37 is also terrifying when we take into account the possibility of the clones falling under the command of a renegade Jedi, who deems methodology like this to be necessary, and the idea that a fallen Jedi may enact Order 37 is highly dangerous. We specifically know the impacts that Jedi General Pong Krell had on Umbara when he assumed control over the 501st Legion. Rex and his troops ended up staging a coup against Krell and taking him in as a prisoner of war before his ultimate execution. Pong Krell, Jedi Master, was known for his logistical approach to combat situations and had no room for emotional dissension, with this leading him to sacrifice clones by the dozens in order to achieve his vision of a greater good. It's entirely possible that a Jedi like Pong Krell would have deemed Order 37 acceptable in particular circumstances, and if he had formally issued Order 37, then Rex and his troops would have been forced to comply. When the chips are activated and formal orders are given, clones sacrifice any autonomy and free will, instead being enslaved by the inhibitor chips within their very minds. This directive was also carried out into the era of the Empire, being repurposed with the intention of specifically hunting down Jedi survivors. And while stormtroopers are not constrained by these inhibitor chips, the Empire's sense of morality is not as noble as that of the Republic. We see some iteration of this order on multiple occasions during the era of the Empire, including the most recent episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Within the new Empire, stormtroopers were trained in taking civilian hostages and using them to force the compliance of others, pulling this tactic straight from the clone directives and repurposing it almost exactly. Reva, although she is an Inquisitor and not a stormtrooper, is perhaps one of the most notorious practitioners of Order 37 in this prominent method. In the first episode of Kenobi, she threatens Owen Lars and his family, issuing an ultimatum that would result in his family's execution if one of the two things does not happen. First, either the Jedi must expose himself, or the people must turn on the Jedi in hiding and expose him. This is a textbook example of Order 37, and the process was a step-by-step recreation of the clone directive created by Sidious, with the same results as the initial program intended. Stormtroopers were trained to do the same in mass, sometimes taking entire towns towns hostage for days on end, and scheduling the systematic execution of dozens of hostages over the course of hours, or even days, in order to lure a Jedi out of hiding. As the Grand Inquisitor says, a Jedi cannot help it. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of this order was how incredibly effective it was against Jedi survivors, and why an order that many believed would never be enacted became the Empire's most deadly weapon. In the era of hunting Jedi, Order 37 had perhaps the highest success rate throughout the entire era of the Empire, to the point that it became standard practice. An obscure order was now the go-to. Again, this goes directly back to what the Grand Inquisitor preaches in the very same episode of Kenobi. And for as heinous his actions are throughout the saga, he is not entirely wrong about the Jedi in this practice of luring them out. The Jedi were trained to be warriors of peace and justice, guardians of the innocent, and protectors of the weak. They remain compelled to serve the people and to do good wherever they can, which includes protecting those who have been oppressed. As for the description of Order 37, it says this: Order 37 was one of a series of contingency orders that the clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic learned when they were being trained on the planet of Kamino. It dealt with using a large amount of civilian hostages to force the capture of an individual. The order involves suppressing local populations, including mass civilian arrests and civil lockdowns, and then issuing the ultimatum: if the local populace does not turn over said individual, all the arrestees will be executed. Though it was rare for stormtroopers to have ever used this order, it was a last resort to capture any wanted individual, or at least this is how it was intended. This is why Order 37 was the most deadly of the contingency orders, as again, the Republic never actually agreed to enact this order unless a highly valued individual was ever in need, and they needed to locate them immediately. However, again, the order became quite common practice among the era of the Empire, and proved to be perfect for exposing Jedi. And the second a Jedi exposed themselves, the entire might of the Empire collapsed around them, from the power of the Inquisitors to the battalions on end of stormtroopers that seemingly were endless, all converging in one location, on one Jedi. This is just another example of Palpatine's ultimate deception. Not only did he have something in place to turn on the Jedi and have the clones execute them immediately in Order 66, but he also developed Order 37 right beneath their nose as well, the perfect method for hunting and killing a Jedi survivor. And just as Order 66 was enacted and implanted within the clones' brains, so was Order 37, with Order 37 being the issue that was given to clone troopers immediately following Order 66, for those rare Jedi that managed to survive the initial stage of the great and deadly Jedi Purge. But anyway, students of the Force, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the dreaded Order 37 and its impact on the galaxy overall? What are your thoughts on the Order giving the clones the approval to butcher and kill hundreds of innocent civilians at a single time in order to lure out a target? And do you believe that this order is actually worse than Order 66? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching and continuing to support the channel. May the Force be with you, and I hope that you have a great day.